Welcome to another edition of One on One with Mitch Lafon. Joining me this week, Quiet Riot drummer Frankie Banali. Have always loved Frankie. Great guy. Their new documentary is called Well, Now You're Here, There's No Way Back. We talk about that. We talk about singer Kevin DuBrow. And of course, we talk about Vinnie Vincent. Uh, I know, you're thinking, what? Vinnie Vincent? Yes, apparently back in the day, Frankie and Vinny were good friends. And so we chat about that. We chat about his near moment of being included in KISS when Peter Criss left the band. And on the second half of this episode, we have got Bruce Lamont of the band Yakuza, who's also in a Led Zeppelin tribute band called Led Zeppelin 2. And with Frankie Banali being a great Led Zeppelin fan, how could I not have Bruce Lamont and some Led Zeppelin on this episode? So there you have it. Let's get right into it. Here is Frankie Banali. We are speaking with Quiet Riot drummer Frankie Banali. Good day, sir. How are you?
I'm very well, and you, Mitch?
Good. You know, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. We've had many chats over the years. You were one of the first persons who sent a gift when my daughter was born in 2003, which I will absolutely never forget. So, again, thank you for that again, and just always a pleasure just talking to you.
Yeah, always great chatting with you. It's been way too long, and I'm going to have to get up to your neck of the woods so I can actually see you, shake your hand, give you a hug, and buy you a beer.
Yeah, that would be great. That'd be great. Now, you know, there is that Heavy Montreal Festival in August, and I think Quiet Riot would be a great addition. This year they had, you know, Dawkins and Warrant and Lita Ford, and hello, I think Quiet Riot fits right in on there. So there you go.
Well, any opportunity for Quiet Riot to play for our Canadian friends, I will take. So let me look into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get started with we're here to talk about the film. Well, now you're here. There's no way back, which of course is a lyric from one of your greatest songs. You know, "Bang Your Head," Metal Health. Um, how did this get started? I mean, were you looking at around and seeing what Anvil had done with their movie and other people, and just said, "Yeah, you know what? We got a good story too." Was that sort of the genesis of it?
No, it
Okay.
actually came from a different point altogether. The catalyst of it was the fact that I was going through the archives with director-producer Regina Russell, and as I'm a fan of Quiet Riot, and I'm a fan of music and the things that I have done. So I have archives that go back 3+ decades. So we were looking through a lot of footage, home movies, recordings, a lot of photographs, a lot of magazines, and I had mentioned to Regina that after taking 3 years off after the death of Kevin, that I was considering the possibility of putting the band back together, but that I would only do so after speaking with Kevin's mom, who I'm very close to make sure that she was okay with me continuing the band after Kevin's passing. So it started from there.
All right, so let me ask you about some of that then. Kevin's mother. You went and asked her for her blessings to continue the band. If she had said no, just simply no, would you have gone on anyway with a little bit of guilt behind it, or you'd have just said, okay, and that's it, I'm doing something else?
Well, I could have moved forward without her blessings, but it would have been very empty for me to
Okay.
do it because even with her blessing, I still have to continue without Kevin. And Kevin was the best friend I ever had. Even when we were at each other's throats at different times in our careers for a variety of reasons, the friendship was always there and it was always solid no matter what. So it was going to be difficult enough doing it without him, but without her approval, and have her, by any stretch of the imagination, think that I was doing something that was not right, I would have dropped it right then and there. Right then and there, I would not have gone forward and just, decided what I was going to do with the rest of my life.
Right, and so I guess there was a sort of an emotional relief to her giving you the blessing.
Yeah, I didn't know, to be honest with you, I didn't know how she was going to feel about it. I mean, obviously, she was very much affected by Kevin's passing. I mean, Kevin was the world to her. So I didn't know which way it was going to go, and I planned to visit Kevin anyway, and she lives very close to where Kevin is resting, so that was the day that I chose to see if it was possible.
I wasn't going to get into the whole Kevin thing really, but since you've mentioned it, when he passed, you said quite clearly, "That's it. There will be no more Quiet Riot."
Yeah.
Um, and which was a fair statement, and of course, people do change their minds, which is perfectly fine. Um, were you afraid that the band wouldn't be accepted after you came back, especially after you had made that statement?
Well, I knew that I was going to get a lot of criticism about the statement because people never really look into or look very deeply into what a person does when they're consumed in grief. I think that anybody that has ever lost a family member or their greatest friend um, has a bit of you reach this crossroads. Well, what do I do now? What happens now? And I don't apologize for the statement, and everybody always grabs that one statement that I don't apologize for the statement that I make, and I don't, because I made it. I was very honest and sincere when I made it. I
Oh,
was
absolutely.
in the deepest of depression that I've had in a very, very long time because of it, and I really didn't see how it was possible to continue without Kevin. But continuing without Kevin, I have done so. And did I think it was going to be difficult? Absolutely. Did I think I was going to be able to make it work? I had no idea. But I knew that if I didn't try it, if I didn't at least try to see if I could continue beyond Kevin's lifespan, I would always regret it, and I'm glad I moved forward. I don't apologize for that whatsoever.
Yeah, and by the way, I take no issue with you having put out that statement because it was absolutely appropriate in the context of the time. And I make no issue with you continuing. Listen, it's been proven by psychologists and others that our 15-year-old self is not our 20-year-old, 25-year-old self, which is not our 30. We change, and we change our mind, we change our politics, we change our religion, we change the way we eat. People change, and I don't know why anybody would hold you accountable for having made a sincere statement in a moment of grief. I mean, I don't understand why that would even be an issue, quite frankly.
Yeah, like I said, it's the way I look at it is, Dad dies on Monday, and the family splits up and goes to the four corners of the earth because it's not the same family anymore. No, it doesn't happen. Life continues, and you go on, and there's no script for it. There's no blueprint. I think each individual has to process grief in their own way, and every individual has the right to continue and live the best possible life that they can do it. And for me, Quiet Riot was what I wanted to do. I miss Kevin, but I also miss Quiet Riot. So
Yeah, and so let's get back to the movie then. So the movie does trace some of the route you took after that with Mark Huff and Scott Volcom and of course now Jizzy. Um, so when the band decides to get back together and you go, okay, we need a singer. What were the parameters you had set in terms of singers? Were you looking for a guy who sounded exactly like Kevin, who moved exactly like Kevin? Or you said, all right, you know what? We can't do that. We just got to get a guy who can do these songs justice without being a mimic.
um, my mindset really was understanding that Kevin is impossible to replace because he was an incredible entertainer. He had an incredible amount of energy. He loved being on that stage, so he sold it every single night. And then on top of that, he had the most incredible range of anybody I have ever heard. So I didn't know what was going to happen. So essentially, what I did is I just cast a very broad net and just pulled it in and see what was in that net. And it could have gone a variety of different ways. It ended up going the way that it did. We had two false starts, two failed attempts, which brings us up to real time now.
Right, up to Jizzy. Let me ask you, there is a certain drummer of a rock band right now that has started a new version of the band and is getting a lot of flack for it, a lot of criticism online for having gone out with this new formation. In your case, Carlos and Rudy are still around. They
Hmm.
still play. Why not get those two guys back and make it sort of that classic Metal Health lineup?
Well, I think a lot of people fail to understand and realize that um, both Rudy and Carlos have been out of the band for I think 12 years now. They
Right.
haven't been in the band since the end of 2003. So it's not like they were in the band at the time of Kevin's death, and that was the natural progression. In the case of Rudy, who I love dearly, he's you know one of my closest friends, if not my closest friend now, and one of my oldest friends because we met each other when I was 18 and he was 19. And Rudy is a he's got a pedigree like there's no tomorrow. He has played with so many great artists. He's such an incredible performer. He's one of the sweetest persons I know and so incredibly genuine, but he's also a very busy bass player. He's everywhere all the time. And so that wasn't an option. In the case of Carlos, I think Carlos is probably one of the most underrated guitarists out there. I think he's an amazing guitarist, just really top shelf. But as far back as 2004, when Kevin and I decided to put the band back together after roughly a year of the band not really functioning, he didn't want to be a part of it. He didn't want to be a part of it then, and so from that point on, I just moved forward without him, and I wish him the best of luck. I think anybody that he works with, he's an incredible asset, and they're incredibly fortunate to have him. But he hasn't been part of the equation for a long time.
Yeah,
And
you're very right.
I like Carlos, but we never had anything in common. Even back in the glory days, he had his own circle of friends, and I had my own circle of friends. So it wasn't like he was present in my personal life for the entire history that we've known each other. It was more of a business relationship than a personal relationship.
You've mentioned business, and of course, rock bands are a business. People seem to forget that it's a music business. They think it's some kind of music summer camp, which it's not. The last album you released, Quiet Riot 10, was sent to digital only, Amazon, iTunes, no physical product. And you've been quoted as saying, "Listen, the business is just it's not there to print up CDs." Is that something that you still feel, and would not a limited sort of vanity pressing to sell at shows be worthwhile?
I think at some point in the future, I will consider going back into the studio again and recording. What ended up happening is after releasing QR10, there were two different distinct camps. There was the camp that said no physical release, I'm not doing the downloads, and then there was the camp that was just illegally downloading it faster than they could sit there in front of their computers and do so. So it became a point that what was the point? I mean, I never thought that it was going to turn a profit. My only hope was that at least I would be able to recoup some of my expenses because I funded the entire thing. And it became very obvious that that was not going to happen, so I pulled it off the market. Is there a possibility that Quiet Riot will record new music in the future? Yeah, there is that possibility. And I've learned a valuable lesson from the whole digital thing. If we do go into the studio, then I'll belly up to the financial bar and fund it again and make physical copies, probably a small run, and go from there. So it's not out of the question, but it's not in the immediate future either.
Is the music on QR10 lost forever in the sense that you'll never re-release it, or it's sort of just lying in state until you get another clang
I,
going?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I pulled the files, and I mean, it exists obviously because I have it, and I actually, I had good intentions. There was photo sessions were done, artwork was done, so there was a point where I was going to go ahead and do physical copies. Everything, all the machinery was in place, but when I saw what was going on, I just pulled the plug. and invested that money elsewhere with Quiet Riot.
Which is not necessarily a bad decision. Now, I want to go back into the past a little bit. Some of the stuff, some of the stories that some people know, but maybe not as much as they should. And before Quiet Riot, you had been doing some session work, including one session with Billy Idol on one of his biggest tracks, Moni Moni. Um, Tell me a little bit about that session and what it was like being a struggling musician that was sort of taking these sort of ghost um, guest spots. If I'm for the, I mean, and I don't mean that in an insulting manner, but you know what I
No,
mean.
no, I know what you mean.
Right.
The situation with Billy Idol, I didn't know who Billy Idol was at the time that I got the call from his producer Keith Forsey. But I immediately did research. I remember this was a time where you didn't have a computer. You didn't sit in front of the computer and type in Billy Idol, and tons of material would come out. I started asking people. I started asking questions. Started going through magazines. Found out that he was in a known band in the UK. And he was here in the U.S. So we got together for the initial meeting. I liked him very much. It was very pro. We went over to the Rainbow after the meeting and had drinks and discussed music and films. And in that regard, we had some things in common and some things that were totally not in common. But we got along well. And I was booked to come in and do just the one track, Moni Moni. It took 45 minutes to get the drum sound, took 30 minutes to cut the track. They were very happy, and they wanted me to cut more tracks, and I was able to only do one other one because I was double booked that day. I had another session with the great producer, Roy Thomas Baker. So I went in and did the tracks that I did, and off I went to another session. It was a great experience for me because it was the first hit single that I had ever played on. So it was a great, wonderful, positive experience, and everybody was great to work with. All the musicians, Billy and Keith didn't credit anyone on the EP except for themselves, and I understood that because Billy was known in the UK, but he was relative unknown in the US. So they wanted to make the point that this was Billy Idol on that EP. Much to my pleasant surprise, about a year ago, I picked up Billy's autobiography, and he finally did credit myself and the other musicians that are on the record, and it was wonderful. He said that was the first time he played with good musicians, so it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's not a bad compliment. Now, were there other recordings at the time that you have done that people don't know about? I mean, you mentioned Roy, who obviously did what was it, Queen? He did. Was it Queen that he was doing?
Yeah, he did
Right.
Queen. Free. He worked with everybody.
So what was that project, if I may ask? Is that something that people know that you were on?
Well, it was something that actually was never released. It was J.C. Crowley, who was in the group Player, and he had a production deal with Roy, and they were going to do a record, and I went in and did those sessions, but and nothing came from it. I did my work with them, and then I went about my business, doing other sessions. So I wasn't aware that nothing came of it until much later. But Roy liked me enough to bring me into some of the sessions. I went in and worked with Roy, with Andy Taylor after he was out of Duran Duran.
Wow.
So he recommended me for a number of things. I actually did recordings with Steppenwolf. I toured with Steppenwolf for nearly 2 years, 78 and 79, and we actually went into the studio and recorded some tracks, but not long after I left the band, it imploded and nothing came from those tracks. But I'm still really good friends with Nick, and I played with him recently, about maybe 4 months ago.
Wow. It sounds to me that there's a Frankie Banali box set in the making.
There's a lot of material out there. There's a lot of things that I have in my archives that were never released. But you get into first the business aspect of it, getting clearances and the publishing and everything that goes along with it, and then you have the eternal problem we have now that you can put something together and release it, and it's going to be stolen more times than you're going to sell it.
Yeah, unfortunately. You mentioned the word Crowley, which of course makes me think of Ozzy Osbourne. You had one of those sort of brush with greatness moments with Ozzy where Randy Rhoads had said, "Hey, do you want to come play with Oz, and you jammed. Tell me a little bit about that experience. What was it like? Because at the time, he had left Sabbath. They were putting back together this band. He was basically down and out. Um, how did you find that rehearsal?
Well, it was an interesting period for me because I was very active during that period. Vinnie Vincent, before he had the
Vinny.
Vincent last name, we were talking about putting a band together, and he would often come to my apartment in West Hollywood, and play me new songs. And the songs were unbelievable. I mean, he really crafted some incredible rock riffs. But nothing came of that. At the same time, I was working with Trevor Rabin, who had come to the U.S. Via the U.K. After he left South Africa, and I actually recorded, I think, about 22 songs with him. Most of them were the blueprints for the first Yes record that he did. So I was doing a lot of things. I was working with Roy on the side. I was in a number of bands. And I wake up one morning and my phone rings, and it's Randy out of nowhere. I didn't even know he had my phone number, and he says, "Frankie, you want to play with Ozzy?" And I said, "The guy from Black Sabbath?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, but you're gonna have to pick me and my drums up because I don't have a car." And he said, "No problem." And he arranged it, and we got together at a rehearsal studio called Mars. And came in. I brought the full kit, the same kit that I recorded the Mental Health record, the big 26-inch bass drum. I even brought the gong, and that's the first time I met Dana Strum, who knew all the Black Sabbath songs. I knew no Black Sabbath songs, and it was a great experience. I found Ozzy to be quiet, and quite a personality. And he sat there on a piano bench while we were working on material, and he was recording everything on a little cassette player. And we ran through quite a few songs, including the earliest version of Over the Mountain. So it was a great and wonderful experience. I mean, for me, it's the little things that I remember fondly. Randy looking over at me and giggling when we were playing together, because I was probably the loudest drummer he had ever played with at the time, and also because my focus was not to show off and play a drum solo, but to be, solid and a backbeat. So, watching him turn around or look to the side of his face and giggle was a great memory. Taking a break and me wanting to go down to the corner liquor store to get a soda, and Ozzy asking me if I minded if he came with me, and I said of course, and he got an orange juice. I mean, those were the little things that I remember fondly. Nothing came of it, and but I was thrilled for Randy because even then, not knowing what the future would hold for Ozzy, I knew that was a step in the right direction for Randy, because in L.A., everybody adored Randy. He was an incredibly personable person. He was a great guitarist, and everybody loved him in L.A., but nobody knew him outside of L.A., and that talent needed to be heard. And man, let me tell you, it was heard. So,
oh yeah, it was heard.
It did.
You mentioned Dana Strum, of course, who's in Slaughter and the Vinnie Vincent Invasion. Love Dana, one of the nicest guys I know personally. You had Vinnie Vincent coming, or Vinnie Cusano,
right,
coming to your apartment. Were you considered for the Vinnie Vincent Invasion drum spot when they held their auditions? No.
No, absolutely not. That never. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen or spoken with Vinny since the days that he was coming over to my apartment. So that was never a consideration.
Are there any demo tapes that you might have worked on together? Did you work on any of the early KISS songs that he had been writing, or any of that stuff?
No, it never got to that stage, because essentially what was happening is we were talking about putting a band together. So he would come over and play me songs, and the material was solid. But we never got to the point of actually, looking for a singer and a bass player to put anything together. And to be honest with you, I was so busy being in a number of different bands all the time just to make ends meet that unless it came together quickly, I generally bypassed it.
Right, which is fair enough. You don't you right, the expression is fish or cut bait, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and like I said, I had my responsibilities. I was very motivated, and I was working a lot. I was doing a lot of different shows, anything from a hard rock band. One of my favorite bands of the period was a band called Monarch, which had Michael Monarch, who was the original guitarist in Steppenwolf and the guitarist in Detective, and we were a three-piece that was world class, but nobody really paid any attention to us. But I was also, moonlighting doing new wave records and doing new wave gigs. I was in a rockabilly band. If it had to do with music and if I could bring something to the table, I was doing it, and I was working all the time.
Indeed, you were. Now, let me just ask you. I'll throw this out there, out of the blue. Early '80s, you had a Vinnie Cusano connection. Kiss had gotten rid of Peter Criss. Were you ever considered for the Kiss gig? Or did you ever audition?
I never auditioned. I did get a couple of phone calls, and Gene Simmons actually wanted to hear me play, but his schedule meant that he would only be able to see me play when I was doing some rehearsals with a new wave band. And I told him straight out front, if you're looking for a rock drummer, this is not the band that you're going to see me doing that, because I'm not going to sabotage the band and all of a sudden, pull out the rock chops when I'm there to do a new wave gig with a female singer. And at that point, I didn't have a track record, a recorded track record large enough for Gene to have looked at and said, okay, I just saw this guy playing a new wave band, but he's actually a solid rock drummer. So that wasn't an option. So nothing ever came of it. There's more to the story, but I'm gonna lay that rest for now.
Let it rest for now. We'll talk about the makeup design that you had in mind for another, right? Right.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the famous Frankie the Dog-Faced Boy of Kiss.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. That would have been a great design.
Yeah, instead of doing a drum solo, I would just chase a cat character around the drum set. I think it'd be more interesting, and less people will go get a beer.
Thinking about that though, at the time, sort of not turning down, but just not going forward with the audition process and potentially getting into KISS, being the musician you were at the time in terms of financial stuff, you might have gone, oh God, what did I just do? But on the other hand, right after that, Metal Health takes off. You're on top of the charts. You're beating out, Pyromania. You knocked off Synchronicity, the Police off the. Um, you must have had some kind of pride about that and go, you know what? I stuck to my guns, and damn it, we made the right choice here.
Well, here's the reality of the situation. Had the process, after those rehearsals with Ozzy, had the process continued, and let's say it would have continued to the point where I would have been in Ozzy's band, and we would have recorded their first album and their second album and all that, and Dana would have been part of it. There would not have been a continuation of Quiet Riot. There would have been no Metal Health record, and I think you can argue the fact that if you look at the landscape of what was going on in the American music charts when Metal Health came out, nobody was doing what we were doing, and essentially once Metal Health went number one, the floodgates opened because managers, labels, accountants, attorneys, they were all looking for the next Quiet Riot, and they were signing bands left and right, and a lot of good bands were signed because these business entities saw that Quiet Riot was successful in making money.
Agreed.
None of that would have existed, so who knows if the 80s music rock scene would have happened, or if it would have happened in the way that it did. There would have been no Quiet Riot, there would have been no Slaughter, maybe there would have been a lot of the other bands. So history would have changed greatly had it come down that way.
And some people might say, "Well, Frankie's thinking a little bit too much," but I fully agree with that assessment. Without that Quiet Riot album, like you said, the labels, because they always like to have a knockoff, right? They want to be in on the next big thing. they probably would have ignored Rat. They probably would have ignored Motley Crue. And that whole Sunset Strip would have been, Flock of Seagull knockoffs. And
Well,
so,
Here's the distinction. While I credit Quiet Riot and the mental health record in particular for being at the forefront of what became, the U.S. '80s music scene, I have always also stated that all the bands that came after us that were signed after the success of the mental health record, those bands that became successful on their own merits. They
I
became
agree.
successful via their hard work. They became successful via their songwriting and their capabilities. Quiet Riot had nothing to do with the success they achieved. What I say is that Quiet Riot made it possible by opening the door for all of them to walk in and many of them to walk in and get deals. I never said and never will say, don't think or believe that Quiet Riot made them successful. Quiet Riot made Quiet Riot successful. They did it on their own, but the industry gave them the opportunity because they saw the value of what the mental health record had done.
Right. And I'm not saying that you were taking credit for what Motley Crue did, obviously. I'm just saying that the A&R guys at, Capitol and Atlantic and Universal and all, they would have not gone out to the Sunset Strip bars to find those bands had they not seen the success of mental health. And of course, once they did and they found Motley, then of course Nikki Sixx are totally responsible for their own success. But
well, listen, I know that you get it. I know that you get it and you understand how it worked. But the reason I stated it because I know that there's going to be somebody out there who might listen to this interview and not
right.
really pay attention and say, well, Frankie Banali is taking credit for all these bands becoming successful.
Right.
I take credit as a part of Quiet Riot for the success of Quiet Riot. Everybody else did it on their own.
Right. I can just imagine the headline now, right? Motley Crue successful because of Frankie Banali. Boy, that'll go over well, won't it?
Well, people who have nothing better to do with their time usually find something destructive to do with their time. But water off a duck's back. It doesn't. Listen, Quiet Riot has been one of the most critically acclaimed and also critically written off bands of all time. If anybody out there thinks that taking a swipe at Quiet Riot makes any difference to me, they're sadly mistaken. I'm used to it, and most of it is based on nonsense. So it's okay.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always had a hard time understanding is bands that have had 25, 35, 40-year careers. If somebody in the media says something untoward or unnice, they get bent out of shape, and it's like, well, I know it's not nice that somebody says that, but at some point in a 40-year career, you sort of got to just, have thick skin and say, Anyway.
Listen, my position has always been anybody out there who has done at least what I have done, if they want to say something to me, I'm all ears. The rest of them, I'm totally deaf to them.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I am running out of time because I do have a 12:30, so I've got about another 5 or 10 minutes, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention W.A.S.P. at all. Here's a time in your career where Quiet Riot wasn't, how can I put this, wasn't doing it for you? Is that too layman to say? And you had to move on. The situation called for you to move on, and you went over to W.A.S.P. and did Headless Children. Talk to me about how that was, because unless I'm mistaken, Quiet Riot was your band, right? With Kevin and Rudy and all that. You were making decisions. You were the sort of the conductor in the train. And at W.A.S.P., now you got to go back to sort of being just a guy on the team. I mean, is that a correct assessment?
Well, let me put it in a correct perspective.
Yes,
what
please,
happened was at the time that Blackie contacted me, and he had talked about working with me for quite a few years before we actually did, as early as 1981 or 82. What happened was when he contacted me to do what became the Headless Children record, he wanted me to join the band. That was the time period where Quiet Riot were recording the fourth Quiet Riot record with Paul Shortino. So if you look at that point in time, here we are. Kevin is no longer in the band. Rudy is no longer in the band. The whole makeup of the band has changed, and especially with, now hiring a new lead singer. And so I was duty-bound to try to make it work, and I was also legally bound to have a fourth Quiet Riot record released based on our contract. So I said to Blackie that I would be more than happy to do the record, but that I wouldn't be able to tour. Or if he found a drummer that could do the record and tour, then that would be great. But I would only commit to doing the record. So he auditioned a number of people. He wasn't happy with them, and he called me up. So I was literally recording the QR4 record and the W.A.S.P record at the same time. What ended up happening is then Quiet Riot went on tour. That version of Quiet Riot went on tour, and we did dates in South America and Guam and Japan. By the time we got to Japan, the band was imploding, and that's when I got together with everybody and I said, "Hey, I'm calling it a day as far as Quiet Riot is concerned. I'm breaking up the band." And at the same time that happened, I don't know how Blackie got wind of it, but got wind of it, he certainly did. And I get a call. And the day before I'm supposed to go back to the U.S. with the rest of the band, he calls me up and he says that he's going to stay. He's going to stay in the U.S. instead of coming to Japan to do press for Headless Children, and then he was going to go to Europe to do the press. He was going to send Chris over to Japan, and Chris and I were going to do the press for the Headless Children, and then continue from Tokyo to London to do rehearsals for the pre-production rehearsals for the tour. And so that began, and that's really the chronology of things. It wasn't me initially moving away from Quiet Riot to do W.A.S.P. Quiet Riot ceased at that point in time, and W.A.S.P. began for me.
Right, of course. But in terms of musical direction and ability to control your playing, that dynamic change, right? With Quiet Riot, you said, I'm playing this, and that's what it goes. And here you sort of have to take direction. Was that a tough adjustment, or is that just, hey, look, that's part of the biz? That's fine.
No, I didn't look at it that way at all. From a business perspective, a huge weight was lifted off of my shoulders, because with Quiet Riot, I was responsible for decisions that had to be made. With W.A.S.P, I was responsible for 0 decisions that had to be made, and at that point in time in my life, that was a blessing. After after everything that had happened with Quiet Riot, both good, both bad, and indifferent. So that, to me, didn't bother me. The other thing about working with Blackie, any artist that I work with, I never bring the old me into a new situation. I treat it as something brand new and fresh. And if what I did with somebody else works in that scenario, great. But the thing that was great about working with Blackie is that he always challenged me. He wanted to see, how out of the box I could play, how differently I could be away from what I normally did, but what I could bring to the table from my past as well. So it was an absolute bonus. I mean, I loved it. It was great. It was a real fun musical time in my life, and Blackie and I got along great. We've had our bumps in the road like everybody has, but we always got along great. And I spoke with him as recently as 3 weeks ago.
Well, the last time you did something with W.A.S.P, I believe it was the Neon God. Not a trilogy. It was what do we call it? It was just 2 albums.
Part 1 and 2.
Part 1 and 2. And I'm trying to look for a word for that, but I can't think of one. That was 10, 11 years ago.
I guess.
Yeah.
I don't even remember how long ago it was.
I think it was 2004. And I'm only basing it because this is how my math goes. My daughter was born 2003, and it came out when she was 1. So it's got to be 2004, right?
You're correct. You're correct with your timing, because what happened is I was still physically in Quiet Riot, the reunited mental health version of the band.
Right.
And so I was touring the entire time with Quiet Riot, and the 2 or 3 days that I was home, I was in the studio with Blackie recording Neon Gods Part 1 and 2. So what happened is in 2003, October of 2003, Kevin decided he didn't want to do Quiet Riot anymore, and that was the period of time when Blackie asked me if I would go out and tour, and it's just something that wasn't going to work for me at that point in time. So you're correct with the timing. It was the end of 2003, the beginning of 2004.
See, and that's I think what most parents realize is when you have a kid, that's how you start adding years. Now you go, okay, she was 7 then, which means right. That's how you do it too, I would imagine. Um, you spoke to Blackie 3 weeks ago. If he called you and said, "I need you to come out for 20 dates," or "I need you to be on the next album," would it be a yes, or is it like, well, okay, let's talk business first?
Well, I would welcome working with Blackie again if my Quiet Riot schedule allowed, but I don't think that's in the cards. It was a very social communication, and he sent me a couple of emails that were just absolutely wonderful. These long emails that were absolutely wonderful while he was on tour in Europe. So I'm not going to make anything more of it than it is. I'm looking forward to getting together with him because I like him. We get along. We speak the same language, and so it's going to be fun to do that. We haven't done it, and I haven't seen Blackie since I did the Neon God recordings.
Wow, wow. Well, just imagine a Headless Children album tour with you on drums. That would be something.
Well, everybody seems to want that more than anything.
Except, is there a but
Well,
to that?
I don't know where Blackie's head is at when it comes to that. But again, is the romanticism of the fans. They would love to see a Headless Children reunion
Of course.
and tour and maybe a record, and they would want it to be obviously with Blackie, and they would want Johnny Rod, and they would want Chris Holmes and myself. I don't see that being in the cards because I know only too well what it's like to have situations in a band where people don't get along, and that seems to be the case with some of that membership.
Right. And, listen, the romantic fan in us always wants the original lineup or the lineup that we grew up with. And having done these interviews for many years and all this, you realize that business, personalities, wives, all kinds of stuff are part of the equation, and you just sometimes anyway. Let's get, just because I do have to wrap this up, unfortunately, because I've quite enjoyed this chat. The movie, ends basically as Jizzy Pearl comes in. There's some added footage now. Is there a part 2 to this documentary? Is there a short film, or just basically how do you see the band now, where you are in 2015?
Well, I don't think that there's a part 2 of the movie. I think that if people who are interested in either Quiet Riot or who are interested in a movie about life, if they go to quietriotmovie.com, they can see the film there. They can see over an hour's worth of bonus features that were not in the theatrical release, and they can pre-order the DVD for those who like physical copies there. Is there going to be a cinematic continuation of this? I don't think so. What's going to happen is the Quiet Riot is going to continue to tour. We've the last 2 years we've toured harder than we have in quite a while, and I've already got a number of dates into 2016. So I'm looking forward to continuing to do Quiet Riot.
Yeah, and the band sounds great. And on the DVD release, you could throw in QR10 as a bonus disc. Why not? Have some fun, Frankie. Always a pleasure. And I apologize to those who want to hear more. I unfortunately have something booked in 15 minutes from now. But always a pleasure. And boy, you definitely have to get to Montreal or Ottawa or somewhere nearby so that I can come and see this lineup. I saw you with Scott. I saw you with Kevin. I need to see you with Jizzy. I hear great things, and I have no reason to not believe what I'm hearing. But I do want to see it for myself. So.
Well, I'll do what I can to that end. You won't be disappointed. And we've had a very, very really nice and long relationship, you and and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Absolutely, Frankie. Always a pleasure. And there you have it, folks. My interview with Quiet Riot drummer Frankie Banali. The documentary is called Well, Now You're Here. There is No Way Back. I certainly recommend checking that out. But more importantly, I recommend checking out Frankie Banali and the band Quiet Riot live if they're coming to a town near you. It's always a fun show, and they've got Jizzy Pearl in there now, and they've been sounding fantastic. So there you go. Check out Quiet Riot and head over to quietriotmovie.com for more about the documentary. Let's turn this over now to Bruce Lamont, who sings in a band called Yakuza, but he is currently making the rounds in a Led Zeppelin tribute band called Led Zeppelin 2. If you've gone to YouTube and checked it out, you'll see that the band sounds almost just as good as the real thing. I know purists will say, Mitch, you're crazy, but they're really doing this at a high level. Um, so I gave Bruce a call and we chatted about Led Zeppelin 2 and a little bit about Yakuza. The fun thing is that Bruce took us for a ride around the town in his car as we were doing the interview. You can hear all kinds of great stuff going on in the background. So let's check out Bruce Lamont of Led Zeppelin 2 and also Yakuza. Here is Bruce. You know, Bruce, you've been with Yakuza for many years. The band is revered, did the whole Century Media thing. Now you're doing Led Zeppelin 2. Um, Talk to me about the show. I mean, what can people expect when they come out to see Led Zepp 2?
Led Zeppelin 2, we primarily tend to focus on more of like the Zeppelin live experience. We're not regurgitating album cuts or the cuts the way they, were done on record or their studio records. We definitely do. We kind of leave some room there to perhaps indulge a bit in some of the improvisational elements that Zeppelin had with their shows. You get the 12 to 25 minute version of Dazed and Confused. We won't go with the 30-minute version of Moby Dick. That's kind of, that's a little rough. I don't know if folks' attention span in 2015 can handle it. Although I would love to take a break, but all kidding aside, we tend to focus on that more often than not. Try to vary the setup as much as possible as far as trying to cover most of their catalog within each show. This particular tour we're on right now is the Australian Pink Floyd. We're limited to playing 60 minutes, so we want to get some of the songs in that most folks know and love, but also too maybe a couple of deeper cuts to satisfy those massive Zepp heads. Costumes, lighting, the whole 9 yards. We don't, we either go big or go home. That's kind of our motto. So.
Talk to me a little bit about the length of the songs. You said you're not going to be doing the 40-minute jam of Moby Dick, but with Yakuza, you have done songs that are long, and I'm thinking of the song from the Way of the Dead album, the 01000, which was 43 minutes long. Is there such a thing as a song being just too long?
No, never. But within the Zeppelin world, even when we're doing our own shows, our sets are clocking in around 2 hours, 15 minutes or so. But no, if there was a night where our bonzo would want to really go for broke and do 30 minutes, okay, do it. Why not? But normally that's not the case. But what like Dazed and Confused, definitely we play that song at various lengths, just kind of feeling it out, which is fun. Actually gives this project, little extra life,
Yeah. Now you've recently done a show in Brooklyn in August, which was all the deep cuts. For the average show, though, the average Led Zeppelin 2 show, do fans get to see sort of all the hits? Do we get the Stairway to Heaven and Black Dog and Immigrant Song, or do you try to focus more on the deeper cuts?
Well, those three particular cuts, yes. In fact, we probably almost always do Immigrants. We rarely don't do Stairway. Again, Stairway is another one where we kind of take some liberties and do more of the live version. There's some extended solos and whatnot. So I mean, that's kind of a fun one actually to do. But yeah, we'll sprinkle in. Of course, we have the hits, but we'll always be mindful about having some songs that either something didn't play live or songs that were rarely played. I mean, we're big fans of the Presence record, so we try to throw in Achilles' Last Stand, or we'll do Hot Time from Nowhere or something like that.
Right.
And Physical Graffiti as well too. There's some songs on there that they didn't play live. Down by the Seaside, we'll do that, or we've actually done that whole record before. Yeah, like I said, I mean, definitely try to have that balance of both.
Now, how long are you focusing on Led Zeppelin 2? You haven't done a Bruce Lamont record in a few years, the last one I think being Feral Songs. You haven't done a Yakuza one recently. Are you more focused on doing these sort of cover band shows, or do you still want to focus on original music?
Well, I just finished tracking a new Lamont solo record.
Oh, great!
Out next year, yeah. I have some other projects that have popped up in the last couple of years. Corrections House, which is myself, Mike Waves, My Hate God, Scott Kelly from Neurosis, and Sanford Parker,
right?
Producer from Chicago. We did a record in 2013 called Last City Zero. We have a new record coming out in October on Neurot. I have a new band called Brain Tentacles with Dave Whitty from Useful Waste and Discordant Axis, and Aaron Dawson from Keel Hall. We just inked a deal with Relapse to do a record next year.
Oh, that's kind of
another band called Bloodiest.
Right.
Chicago band. Our second record is out in January of next year. So I'm doing both. I mean, once this tour ends next week, I have like a month off, and then I'm going out on a solo tour with Scott Kelly from Neurosis November, December, and then back on the road with these guys.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Back in the studio with Brain Tentacles. We're writing a new Yakuza record right now. Hope to record it next spring. So yeah, I'm trying to hang on for dear life right now and do it all.
And do it all without getting into the details of everything. One of the members of Bloodiest, Sean Patrick Riley, had some legal issues. Have those been resolved at this point, or is that something that's still ongoing?
That's still ongoing. Actually, he's not with the group any longer.
Okay.
So we had to move on from that. He's a dear friend of mine, actually. So it's a tough thing to discuss.
Yeah, and that's why I don't want to get into the details. I just wanted to know where we stand. Okay. In terms of, and I know I'm going to just get away from the Led Zepp for a second. In terms of Yakuza, right. The band was known for being, and the word was always said, avant-garde. It was sort of more of a metal fusion rather than straight metal. Is that important for you to sort of have no rules and just do it that way?
Definitely. I mean, I never was the one that came up with a title for that kind of music, or none of us did in the band. I mean, I think we just wanted to kind of have the freedom to create the way we wanted to create. That's been the case ever since that band started. Before that band started, every other project I'm involved in as well too. Yeah, it's like it's open terrain. Anything's possible.
Yeah. Now back to Led Zeppelin 2. You're doing these shows with the Australian Pink Floyd show. What is the plan for the band going into 2016? Will there be a lot more shows?
We have like 2 times a year where we primarily focus on this band touring, and that's usually at the winter time, which is January, February, March. We usually go out, do a U.S. run on our own. Last 4 or 5 years, it seems to be a good time for this band. Do it then, and then summer touring. Obviously, this was a great experience for us. Bigger audiences, great group of people within the Australian Pink Floyd camp, and there's some discussions of us doing some more touring with them next year, perhaps overseas and things like that. So,
that's a great opportunity. Now, along with Ian Lee, Paul Camp, and Matthew Longbone, do you plan on doing original music with those guys, or are they specifically just for Led Zeppelin 2?
Well, no, we've actually discussed. We've done some recordings as Led Zeppelin 2, but not re-recording Led Zeppelin songs. We did record "Immigrant Song" for it was like a promo cross promotional thing we had going with the Chicago Blackhawks hockey team.
Right.
And then, but we kind of kicked around. Let's do some songs that aren't Zeppelin songs in the vein of Zeppelin. So we recorded Elmo Yardbirds too, called "Happenings" 10 years time ago.
Right.
More like how we would do it. And since then, Paul actually he's written a bunch of riffs, and we've been kicking around the idea of writing a couple songs and seeing how they go. We may or may not call the band Led Zeppelin 2, but it would be the four of us.
Which would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun.
Blur the lines a little bit more. Why not?
Why not? You mentioned the Chicago Blackhawks. Are you a huge hockey fan, and are you aware that the Montreal Canadiens are a much, much better team?
I will say this: I do love hockey. I'm actually a bigger baseball fan, White Sox fan than I am a hockey fan. But no, of course I love the Blackhawks, and I'll tell you this: we played the second show on this tour. We played the Bell Center, and we were so honored to be there. And it was amazing, just walking around that place, checking out just all memorabilia, the cups, and all this or whatever. It was really badass. We have no beef with them. No, not one bit.
And I will say this, as a Montreal native, my favorite baseball team is your other Chicago team, the Cubs. I've been to Listen, I've been to Wrigley a million times.
Oh my God, this phone call's breaking up. I have to go.
Oh, you gotta go. But come on, Wrigley Field is one of the greatest places to see a baseball game ever. I mean, it's fantastic.
It's fun. I actually have a little group that I pull together every year called 8 Men Out. I have a friend in Wrigley Ticketing that gets me eight seats together. It's when the White Sox play the Cubs. We go there every year, and it's a bunch of just maniac, metalhead, punk rock dudes that just love baseball, and we always have a good time. And they're extremely accommodating. Every year we get better seats. It's so great. We were like right off home plate this past year, and it's super fun. And great game too. Sox won 1-0. I love tight games like that. So.
Love it.
Good time.
Listen, I have nothing against the White Sox. In fact, if they win in the American League, I'm all for it. I mean, right? We'll finish with this because I do want to get back to the music. Bayul was the last Yakuza album. That was in 2012. We're now 2015. When do you think we'll see the next one? I think you might have mentioned it before, but if you could just...
Yeah, I think we've been writing for the past year or so, so I think 7 songs in. So I would kind of think maybe next spring.
Okay.
we'll get into the studio. No plans on who or how that'll be released, but we kind of work at our own pace, But we have some shows up there this year as well too, so looking forward to getting back to the stage with those guys.
Is there any kind of limits on what Yakuza does? I mean, do you say, okay, we really need to just do this kind of music, we can't have, or are you just open to any kind of experimentation?
Anything. It's wide open, Same with the solos. Same with the solo stuff. That's kind of fresh in my mind. I got to mix it back to the day I'm listening to it. It's like, yeah, anything goes. I was just thinking about a part where I was trying to figure out from one song to transition into the next, and I was like sitting there, and I was like, electric piano. So I pulled out a little boop thing, and I started playing around, and I've never played electric piano on anything ever in my life, and I was like, hit some chords, and I was like, yeah, that'll work. So, whatever comes to mind, I guess.
Well, Bruce, great pleasure talking to you. I certainly hope that Led Zeppelin 2 comes back to Montreal, and of course, folks should check out the band online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye now. And there you have it, folks, my interview with Led Zeppelin 2 frontman Bruce Lamont. He's also in a band called Yakuza. If you want to know more about Led Zeppelin 2, check out Zepp2.com. So Zepp2.com. And also, do yourself a favor and check out Quiet Riot's Well Now You're Here, There's No Way Back documentary. Big thank you to both Frankie Banali and Bruce Lamont for joining me on this episode of One on One with Mitch Lafon. If you like what you have heard, head over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review, as it helps raise the profile of the show. If you want to reach me, you can find me on Twitter at Mitch Lafon. I am Mitch Lafon on Facebook, and there is also the One on One with Mitch Lafon Facebook page. Always happy to chat. Pleasure to answer emails and Facebook comments and so on and so forth. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.